This is Mike. He's a massive pain in my... Ask me any questions about this project that you may have in the comments section below, and I'll do my best to answer them. So I was just kidding with that intro. The aforementioned Mike is actually a good friend of mine who works alongside me in video production at my day job. Mike needed some help getting a weekly stream up and going for his church, so we jumped right in on the project. Overall, it's pretty easy to set up, and if you're looking to do the same kind of thing for setting up a live stream for your church or business or whatever, hopefully something in this video can help you out. So the original setup that the church had for their stream was like this. This is a Mevo Plus. It's an older model and goes through a cell phone app to send streams to various streaming platforms. And the video from the Mevo does look pretty good, but it has a built-in microphone, which sounds really bad in this particular environment. Here's a sample clip.
And if we say these words, don't lose heart. So last week we looked at one of those churches.
Now, supposedly, to get better mic audio, you can pipe in audio to the mic port of the cell phone that's actually controlling the Mevo.
Right.
I guess the newer Mevos have supposedly addressed this by adding a mic port directly to the camera itself, but that doesn't help us out here. And I know you can get adapters to add an audio port for the newer iPhones, but Mike wanted to do a multi-camera stream, and he was also completely sold when I mentioned that we could build an information ticker and a standby screen for the stream in OBS Studio. So we pieced together what we had on hand to work with before spending any money. That will give you an idea of where you need to spend your money. That is, if you need to spend any money at all. So they had this Mevo that I mentioned already, and this non-branded 4K camcorder. You see these things all over Amazon, and they're not good. To round it out, I threw in an extra cheapy capture card that I had on hand, and a generic non-branded action cam. The action cam can be run in USB webcam mode, and should be fine for a wide shot. As for the Mevo, we thought we could incorporate it as a secondary shot using AC to PC software. We gave the 10-day trial of that software a shot, but there were just too many hoops to jump through to realistically use it. Various different people will be running the tech side of this show, some more skilled than others, so we were aiming for absolute simplicity with this setup. Plus, the full version of AC to PC software costs $80, so it just doesn't seem like a practical investment. My advice was actually to just sell the Mevo on eBay and use the money from that to buy something that plays a little nicer with OBS. Now I'm going to get into the equipment needed to do a stream like this. First, let's talk about the PC and how powerful should it be. So streaming can get really resource intensive, especially if you're trying to stream at a really high resolution and frame rate. However, this church wants to do the stream on Facebook. That's good on the equipment side of things because Facebook streams are limited to 720p at 30 frames per second. It doesn't take a very powerful computer to handle that kind of stream. To give you an idea, I've done many Facebook live streams for my day job, and I've done a lot of these streams at remote sites, sometimes over crappy Wi-Fi with a Surface Pro 3. By today's standards, this Surface Pro 3 has a very weak i5 processor. It's also sitting at 8 gigs of RAM with an integrated Intel graphics chip. It's definitely nothing to write home about in the performance department. My point is, you can get a much more powerful system than this for very little money. For example, you can grab a refurbished HP Z220 tower with an i5 that will eat this Facebook live stream for breakfast. If you shop around, you can grab a system like this for around $100 to $150. You can also throw an NVENC capable GPU in this system that will take a lot of the strain off of the tower's processor, which would be preferable, but not necessary. For this build, we're working with a machine that was far less powerful than this, but it was donated. It got the job done, and at free, the price was right for my tastes. To round things off with the PC, I installed OBS Studio, which is necessary for this setup, and I also installed Kdenlive, just in case Mike would want to do some recording and simple video editing. I would have preferred DaVinci Resolve for the editing software, but this system is just too weak for Resolve. Next, the most important part of any video is good audio, especially for something like this, that is mostly spoken word. So we piped in the audio from an auxiliary port on the church's mixer. We used a standard 1/4-inch audio cable that the church had on hand, and then a 1/4 to 3.5 millimeter adapter to run it into the PC's mic input port. It's a little jank, but it worked very well, and all for just a couple of bucks. Whenever you set up your audio for a live stream, plan on setting a little bit of time for audio testing and tweaking all of the various audio levels and equipment settings. It's a good rule of thumb to make sure your audio is peaking a little higher than midway through the yellow in OBS. High green and the occasional very low red spike should be acceptable too, but deviating any further from that will not be good. If it peaks too low in green, your audio will be too quiet, and if it peaks too high in red, it will distort and sound terrible. You'll definitely want to do a few test recordings with plenty of audio testing to make sure you got it all correct before streaming a real event. Alright, on to camera talk. So when you're working with cameras in OBS Studio, you need a camera with clean output, meaning you don't want to see things like a battery indicator and focus boxes and things like that on your stream. This is something you'll never have to worry about with a webcam. But if you're taking the feed over HDMI from a DSLR, mirrorless, or camcorder, you have to make sure that the camera that you're working with is capable of feeding a clean signal. So in addition to that, they needed a very specific kind of camera for the main shot here. As you can see, the AV area where the camera would be set up was pretty far away from the stage, so they needed a camera with a good zoom. The camera also needed to be easy to use and preferably cheap. Whatever kind of camera you use will also need to have some method of feeding its video signal to the PC. Some mirrorless and DSLR cameras can double as USB webcams, but in most instances, you will probably need a capture card to get the video from the camera into your PC. And unfortunately for us, that non-branded 4K camcorder looked terrible, so it was out. We were able to use a Canon Vixia HFR 700 camcorder on loan. And if that worked out, they would have gone ahead and bought a decent camcorder for use with this setup. And here's why camcorders are awesome for this kind of setup, and they're almost always my first choice for a business or church stream. They're fairly affordable, and you can pick up a great refurbished Sony camcorder from eBay for under $100. In addition, most camcorders have great zoom, and they're really easy to use. You can probably turn on a camcorder and be up and ready to go, even if you've never touched a camera in your entire life. So we gave it a shot with the Canon Vixia, and oh no. So all of that stuff I said about how great camcorders are, well, there's a trade-off. Here's why camcorders suck. Small sensors. Unless you invest in a really high-end camcorder, it's going to have a very small sensor. A lot of consumer-grade camcorders have a sensor size of about 1/5 of an inch. That's really small. Out in direct sunlight or in a really well-lit room, they're fine, but in this low-lit church, not so much. To really oversimplify it, the larger your sensor size, the better the camera will do in low light. As I mentioned before, a lot of consumer-grade camcorders have a sensor size of around 1/5 of an inch. A GoPro has a sensor size of a little smaller than 1/2 an inch. That's about 6 times larger than a camcorder sensor. And a Micro Four Thirds camera has a sensor that is about 3 times larger than a GoPro sensor, which is still actually considered kind of small in the world of cameras. And we haven't even factored in things like interchangeable lenses, and we won't, not in this video. I'm getting off track. When your sensor size is too small and the shot is too dim, your video will look really grainy. So just buy a camera with a bigger sensor. Problem solved, right? Well, the problem with that is the bigger the sensor, generally the more expensive the camera, like exponentially more expensive. And I'm gonna go on a rant here. I'm not a religious guy. I haven't been inside many churches, but of all of the churches that I have been inside, they're all so dreary. Not ideal for recording video. Plus, in this shot, for example, the biggest light source is coming from behind our subjects. That's the exact opposite of what we want. And if I'm to believe what I see on TV shows, Catholic churches are even more dark and dreary than this. It's like churches are lit for a romantic dinner with a lady friend that you're trying to impress, but without any of the sexiness to follow. As a matter of fact, churches kind of guilt you for any of the sexiness. So don't take this as a slam on anyone's beliefs, just a slam on the logistics of recording video in a church. The video that you're looking at now is a Buddhist temple. Just look at that. Large sources of natural sunlight pouring into colors that hold the light very well. That's what a videographer likes to see. So Jesus, if you're watching this, please get with Buddha. Consult with him on how he does his lighting. And please pass that protocol down to your people. Trust me, they'll save tons of money on camera equipment going forward, not to mention the electricity bill in general. But let me get back on track. Getting the right camera for this particular scenario is a real balancing act. They did need to purchase something, and after a lot of thought, the camera that I recommended to Mike, if they could swing it, was the Panasonic Lumix FZ300. It runs around $400 new. To a lot of people, that's not cheap. I wouldn't have considered that cheap when I first started making videos either. But honestly, in the world of cameras, that's not very expensive at all. They could get a DSLR or mirrorless camera, which on the low end will run $500 easy. This is before you factor in the zoom lens that they're going to need, which could easily run $1,000 or more in addition to the cost of the camera. To me, the Lumix FZ300 seemed like the best buy for the money for this particular room because it has an integrated 25 to 600mm zoom lens. It can do clean HDMI out, and once it's set up, it's pretty easy to use. I would have preferred a larger sensor than its 1/2.3 inch, but that's where we get back into the arena of expense. Also, the upside of the FZ300 over a camcorder is that we have control over its shutter speed and ISO, so essentially more control over the light that comes into the camera. And this is what the video looked like with this camera upgrade. I think it's a massive improvement.
2020 has taught us that sometimes plans change. So 2021, we have some things planned, and we're excited about those things, and this is a way that you can hear about those things. God won't give you more than you can handle. In other words, you are self-sufficient. But God didn't create us to be self-sufficient.
And to round things out and give it a little extra polish, Mike grabbed a second cheapy capture card and piped in the church's projector system into OBS, and he built this little Bible frame that the video could sit on. It's a really nice touch. And I think that covers everything we did. I'm sure with things like this, Mike will come up with little tweaks here and there to put more polish on the production going forward. But I'm going to wrap this video up with a shout out to my channel supporters. If you would like to support this channel, either on Patreon or Ko-Fi, there will be links in the description below. Donations are appreciated, but never expected. Remember, the best way to support any small creator is to interact with their content. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. That's it for now, and I'll see you next time with more money-saving tech tips, tutorials, and reviews. Hold on, I need to... My mic's in the shot. I got two mics in the shot.
Oh, I hate you.